Okay, well, let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to the Azure Transformation webinar series. This is episode 2. We're going to be covering artificial intelligence. What are you afraid of? I mean, it's getting pretty close to Halloween, so we thought we'd throw in a little bit of scary theme here. Today is October 25th, 2023. I am Jeff Lizerbram. I'm a pre-sales architect with Managed Solution, and I'm happy to be here today covering this content. For the agenda, we're going to be covering artificial intelligence. What is all the buzz? And do you have the fear of missing out if you're not using it yet? Well, certainly I get FOMO quite a bit. But you know what? We're all in this together, so don't be afraid. You're probably using AI already. We're going to go over some of the AI concepts that are already in flux and a little brief history about it. I am then going to invite my colleagues from Managed Solution to discuss Microsoft Azure AI. Is it a trick or is it a treat? More on that later. More importantly, we're going to be covering Microsoft's responsibility model with AI. I'm going to show you a guided tour of some of the Azure AI possibilities. And I'm going to show you even a demo that shows simple low code or even really no code implementation of AI in the modern workplace. You're going to see how it could be implemented within, say, like Microsoft Teams. Now, during this session, you'll have the ability to type in a question. If you want to hit the Q&A button, go ahead and do that, and we'll try to answer your question during the session. But certainly hang around if you want to hear your question and answers live. Now, first, I'm going to bring on a special guest to discuss AI right now. Just hold on, let me dial him in. Well, everyone, I'd like to introduce you to Sean Farrell, our CEO of Managed Solution, and I want to get your thoughts, Sean. What is Azure AI to you? Is it a trick or is it a treat?
Oh, is it a trick or a treat? Um, well, I think it's both. If I'm going off the spot here, so I mean, I know a lot of people are thinking about it right now as sort of what's kind of the Wild West. What's coming at me? That's the trick in this whole thing. It's what don't I know? What can I learn? And ultimately, people are both optimistic and panicked at the same time that one, it's going to take over some of the things we do in our daily lives, and ultimately may not just be accurate in the way it does things, because a lot of what AI is rational thinking, if you will. If you kind of put it into human form, we think rationally, but we also think a lot with our emotions. So I think people are trying to contend with how much of the rational decision making is going to come out of it. But ultimately, how it's going to help me make an emotional decision, because I think our rational brain has to kind of rationalize something first, and then emotionally we make that final decision. So I think we're contending with that. So the real treat in it all is if we can deduce and get to the result a lot quicker and make a good emotional decision, that's the treat in this whole thing. So I think it's going to have benefits on both sides. I think the real thing that we can't be tricked by is the fact that AI is in a generative stage. It's evolving. It's kind of like a new language, truly, that's being started up. And I think in the next 10 years, it will become something inherent in everything we do. So ultimately, don't be tricked by it. Just kind of see the treats that are coming at you. Different opportunities with different applications, Microsoft specific, Copilot, and some of the AI within Azure, and just see where it fits in the business, but also take your time to understand the security measures, what you're doing with your data that comes out of, Azure and AI, and, ultimately Microsoft, and how to best, leverage that to your advantage.
Great. And there's been a lot of question about how to be responsible with AI. What are your thoughts and how to approach our customers in terms of, how do you really become a responsible end user of artificial intelligence?
Yeah. I think, I mean, in short form, within the business, now I could talk about with outside the business, but I think it goes, both ways. There's definitely access to a lot of tools out there right now that, you can plug in, that can plug into potentially your data, and hopefully your IT teams or even companies like us are making sure that we manage what's being pulled out of our intellectual property, if it were. But I think same thing goes for you at home. It's, even the things that are going to help you write better, essays or books or make videos or whatever those are, just remember those platforms and those technologies are absorbing that natural language, and we just have to be careful with what we put out there because it can't necessarily be erased these days. So, um, understand your limitations, understand what, your family around you is doing in the personal world and how they're using AI. And at the same time, just things that are going to help us make better decisions. You just gotta be careful in how you do it and pick the right tools because once it's out there, it's hard to pull back.
Awesome. I really appreciate your insight. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Now that we realize we're all in this together, let's talk about the buzz about artificial intelligence. And as you can see, there are a lot of topics here that artificial intelligence captures. First off, breakthroughs. The latest breakthroughs in neural networks, pattern recognition, automation really stem from algorithms and data mining and its ability to solve problems. And it's getting better and better every day. Some of this shows up in practical applications, like on your smartphone. You might have an app that does image localization or object detection. I use an application that is used to detect plant species, which is really neat so I can understand what's growing in my garden. Speech and language translation, emotional analysis, information extraction, and chatbots, these are things that you're seeing probably every day, or maybe you're using it already. When I think of artificial intelligence, and when I first heard of it, the first thing in my mind was what? Skynet, right? The Terminator, the robots are among us. Well, that's actually come to fruition now because, especially in manufacturing, it's becoming much more efficient to apply this automation. Predictions and insights. AI is used more and more, and I've noticed it when I'm watching the news and I'm watching the weather and I'm looking to see what the predictions are in that weather pattern or financial markets. And there's a lot of other applications that go into predictions and insights that AI can do for us. Now, whether you like it or not, AI is in charge of our personalization and our experience and how we, as a consumer, behave. Now, you can tell, if you're clicking through your applications or your email or maybe shopping on Amazon, maybe you're doing some kind of chat method or other types of applications on your device, computer. These are all things that help define us as a consumer to give us much better branded and focused insights. One of the best things about AI, in my opinion, is in healthcare. AI is contributing to much better quality of service, and it not only is in terms of the actual diagnosis areas, but also with patient scheduling, patient intake, and those types of scheduling methods. Autonomous vehicles, of course. Probably many of us drive Teslas and have experienced maybe some of the automation driving that's among us. I find it a little scary, a little nerve-wracking, but a lot of people have good trust into it, and it's becoming more and more frequent these days. Natural language. There's these large learning models that are growing every day and getting insights by doing deep learning, machine learning, and natural language processing and natural language understanding. Now, with all of this, there are ethical and social implications that we all have to be aware of. How is AI going to be used economically? Is it, first of all, going to be affordable? Is it legal? Are there legalities surrounding AI that impacts how we do business? Also, is it ethical? We're going to look into some of these responsibility models that Microsoft has defined. And finally, competition. You know what? If you're not using AI today, you're probably already behind the curve. So it's important to stay competitive. Look at AI at least from the beginning to see what it can do for your business. And here's another example of just to get you the more comfort level, knowing that you've used AI before. Well, the invisible man is walking his invisible dog, only to run into another invisible man with his invisible dog, and says to the other, "You look familiar. Haven't we run into each other before?" Well, the thing is that AI is definitely invisible, but it's there. We have security and identification. For example, if you're using something like Windows Hello for Business, facial recognition to log into your laptop or workstation, that uses AI characteristics. Same thing with fingerprint readers and iris readers. Social media, Snapchat, Facebook, LinkedIn, these are all utilizing behavior-based AI in order to help define who you are as either a customer or a consumer. Even my dog, who just barked right behind me, probably is using AI indirectly because of the products that we get for him, and shopping online probably understands what his products are. Digital assistants are all out there, as far as Siri, Google Assist, even Bixby on the Samsung phones. They're all using AI together. And especially in entertainment, shopping, and email, as we covered before. So, believe it or not, it's invisible, but it is out there. And not only has it been out there, it's been out there for a long time. Let's just review the history. And you might have seen this if you're watching episode 1 of our Azure Transformation Series, but artificial intelligence actually came out in the 1950s and 1960s when Alan Turing came up with AI. And gosh, at then it was like the great expectations. The 70s and 80s were, there was some development, but there were a lot of unfilled promises. And it wasn't until the 1990s when AI was actually becoming an industry. This is when we started with machine learning, and artificial narrow intelligence was being developed and growing. In the 2000s, the deep learning active research occurred. And 2010s, we had cloud computing and big data. There are large data lakes, and that was part of the deep learning natural language progression. In 2011 to 2016, this is where things really started happening. Like I mentioned, with all the uh, assistants like Apple Siri, Alexa, Cortana, Google Assistant, even Bixby on the Samsung. This is when neural, long, and short-term memory networks were being developed, and word embeddings and attention models were growing. And 2017 to today, this is where we're starting to see much more in the way of automated machine learning, classification, regression, forecasting, and especially when it comes to machine learning, we're seeing more in terms of reading comprehension and natural language understanding. So AI not only is among us, but it's been among us for a long time. Well, now it's time for a scary poll here. So I'd like your response to see what you think. Is AI a trick or is it a treat? And while we see the poll answers come in, we're going to see what our managed solution colleagues really have to say about this. Let's listen in.
Wow, thanks for having me, Jeff. Very happy to be here. My name is Feli Michaka. I'm a senior field engineer, and I was recently given a second role as the brand ambassador here at Managed Solutions. Some people think I'm crazy, but hey, I'm a people's person. These two roles are just a perfect fit for me, and I'm just having a lot of fun. So thankful to the leadership of Managed. But yeah, AI heard around the world. Wow. It's my opinion, Jeff, that AI is definitely a treat. Now, I know there's a lot of talk about, it's a big game changer. It's going to be a very productive tool for all of us, automate some processes. We know that, but I want to focus on one big part of this big treat, and it's called the AI economy. Look at what happened to companies like NVIDIA, companies like Microsoft, Google. The early and the fast adoption was definitely a key here. I believe that as we learn these tools, Jeff, as we implement these tools, as we adopt these new AI adoption, I think that we will reap the benefits of the economy. Imagine this is a $1.3 trillion economy for the next 10 years. So we definitely want to be a part of that, right? And I will have to agree with what recent statement from Bloomberg Technology. They said that if we adopt AI quickly, we will be 10 years ahead of the competition. So we have a lot of work to do, Jeff. Let's be part of that economy. I'm ready, so sign me up.
All right, that sounds great. Hey, Richard, why don't you introduce yourself real quick? And also, what is your thought on artificial intelligence? Is it a trick or is it a treat?
Hi, Jeff. I'm Richard Swayzgood, Director of Professional Services here at Managed Solution, working here for 15 years. And to answer your question, I'm afraid I'm going to have to do halfway answers, unfortunately. I know that's sort of cheating, but I think it's a bit of a trick and it's a bit of a treat. I do definitely feel that AI products are very useful. The problem, and I think the trick that we're running into is their price. They're very powerful tools. You can use them very well. But now that we're sort of over the honeymoon period and you're starting to see people starting to say, like, it's great, huh? Well, you know, the first hit is free. But now you have to kind of pay up. And so I do feel like overall great tools, but they're going to get very pricey very soon. And I feel some people are going to think that maybe it's not necessarily worth it. An example of that is Microsoft Copilot. $30 per user is a very expensive sell. So yeah, I have to go halfway. Very powerful, but very expensive.
You know what? I like your angle on that. You know, you're covering both sides of it. There's definitely two sides of that story. So thank you for your input.
Awesome.
Right. Well, continuing the Halloween theme here, let's see what other people have to say. Is AI a trick or a treat? Let's find out.
My name is Marshall, and I am an account manager here at Managed Solution. And if I were to say if it's a trick or a treat, it's definitely not a trick because it's real. That would imply that it's not real. And I think it's a treat. I think it's one thing that after a certain amount of time, we're not going to think much about it because it's just going to be part of our daily lives. Like if you go back 40 years and you say, hey, there's this thing called the internet and it's going to be in our pockets, people would be afraid of it and they would be thinking all kinds of crazy things. But now it's just a part of our daily life. I think it's a treat because that is what it will become as long as we don't let the fear overcome us.
So, do you find yourself using AI like in everyday life?
I think innately I already am, and I just don't know it, to be honest, because I think it's already in all of the technology we're using to an extent. It depends on how you define AI, but yes. Now, am I actively going, I need a tool that is AI driven, let me do this? That's also
Right.
a yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your input. Hey, SD, how you doing? I wanted to get your input on what artificial intelligence means to you. Is it a trick or is it a treat? And why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself first?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Thanks so much for inviting me to do this. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Esty Goodspeed. I'm a project coordinator at Managed Solution. And yeah, artificial intelligence to me is definitely a treat. So far, it's been useful helping me with my job as a project coordinator. So a lot of what my job is, it's coordinating meetings and running meetings and taking notes. And one thing that's really helped myself and also the project management team is the new feature in Teams that, the AI takes notes while the meeting is happening. So honestly, it allows me to, really focus on connecting with the client, making sure the meeting stays on track. And I can worry about the notes later because it gives you like a really detailed, bullet points. And then the output is also an action item list. And it's not perfect, but I'm able to hone in on my soft skills. And it allows me to, literally have that human touch with the customers.
It's definitely going to maximize productivity in a way that we haven't been able to, achieve before as marketers, as workers across the spectrum. But again, there are going to be some downfalls. I think there are going to be, some potential threats to jobs. I think so. It's just going to go hand in hand. I think the general consensus, and I really agree with it, is it's both. It's a trick and a treat. Two things can be true at the same time. So it's just going to be a change. It's going to be a change. But it's going to definitely be both.
Tom Martello from Managed Solution here. I'm an account executive based out of Denver, Colorado. Personally, my take is AI is absolutely a treat. No one today in 2023 is looking backwards at the person who invented the wheel and saying, the wheel was a mistake and it made everyone lazy and we should never have done that, right? But in whatever year the wheel was invented, that may be exactly what they were thinking. And just the same, AI can seem overwhelming. It can seem even ominous, right? But I think in the short view, that's all realistic ways to look at it, or fair ways to look at it. In the long view, and in retrospect, I think at some point we'll look back and say, wow, AI made a lot of amazing things possible. And we're just starting to scratch the surface of what that can look like today. Do we have a lot of work to do in understanding the best ways to use it and understanding some of the other ramifications of using it? For sure. And the internet is a perfect parallel to that. No one thought Twitter was going to become what it is. And now, you can make the argument that we have a handle on using it. You can make the argument that we still don't, but we're further along in that process than we were when it first came out. And again, someday in retrospect, that will be the same case with AI.
I'm Nicole. I am a creative marketing lead. I work in all things marketing and branding, and we do a lot of copywriting here. So I definitely think of AI as a treat, especially for marketers. It just amplifies our capabilities across the board. So we do a ton of copywriting, a lot of strategizing, research. And since using AI, I've been able to do my job better and faster because I can focus on the big picture thinking, connecting the dots and the creative aspects to my job, and leave the more tedious and repetitive tasks to AI, such as creating blog outlines, drafting email sequences, and catching spelling and grammar, competitive research. All of this used to take up a ton of my time. And while the results aren't perfect, it definitely gives me a huge head start in all of our marketing initiatives.
Well, I'd like to thank my Managed Solution colleagues for providing their input on AI, whether it's a trick or a treat. And as you can tell, they touched on quite a few of these factors here. There's the human factor. Hey, are we just being too lazy and using AI more? Or is AI going to be beneficial because it reduces mistakes? And what about the cost? Richard touched base on the cost factor that, hey, AI, yes, it's going to be expensive, but maybe it'll be expensive at first, but maybe provide some good ROI over the long term. We touched on some of the ethics and some of the creativeness factors, especially when it comes to marketing within our organization and the social impact. AI, it has a tendency to invoke maybe some unnecessary fears that it's going to increase unemployment. But the reality is that AI can automate repetitive tasks across different industries, allowing you to focus more on your business. So there's definitely two sides of the coin here. AI could be a trick or it could be a treat, depending on your viewpoint. We can't go too much further in this webinar without mentioning being responsible with artificial intelligence. And Microsoft has their own responsibility standard that they have published. In fact, if you want to scan that QR code right there, you'll be able to review all of the areas of the responsibility AI standard that Microsoft has published. Real briefly, though, the categories include accountability, transparency, fairness, reliability and safety, and privacy and security. So when we think of AI, we're thinking about deploying it in a very responsible manner in terms of it being legal, ethical, moral, things like that. And although I'm covering this real briefly, I'm going to keep that QR code up in the upper right throughout the rest of the presentation so you can reference it on your own. Keep in mind, Microsoft Responsibilities AI standard is a crucial aspect of how they see and deploy AI for their customers. Well, Let's explore the Azure AI services, and we can do this by going into your Azure portal and clicking on Azure AI and looking at the overview. And as you can see, there are a lot of Azure AI services here to dig through. Let's go over a few of them just to get familiarized with the territory. First off, Azure OpenAI. It streamlines search engine optimization and rankings. And a use case was where CarMax was able to streamline car research content. Cognitive search employs the semantic search capability to better understand the intent of customer search terms, offers significantly improved results, and drives deeper customer engagement. Semantic search also enables knowledge mining and summary results, which gives users quick snippets without scrolling through numerous results. Computer vision, what a cool concept this is. This includes things like image analysis to detect, caption, and generate insights, spatial analysis, which understands people's presence and movements within physical areas in real time, optical character recognition. We've probably seen that way in the past, but this extracts printed and handwritten text, and facial recognition. We've also probably seen this in the past where it creates intelligent apps and recognizes and validates human identity. The speech and language services have really nice practical applications, which include speech to text, text to speech translation, and speaker recognition. And language identifies key terms and phrases, it analyzes sentiment and summarizes text and builds conversational interfaces. And what's nice about it is that it can include identifying things like personal identifiable information data and securing it. And why not work with documents much faster and smarter with document intelligence? What this does, it applies advanced machine learning to extract text, tables, and structures from documents automatically and accurately. So this turns documents into usable data and shifts your focus to acting on information rather than compiling it. Immersive Reader is really cool because it improves reading comprehension and supports learning processes for people of all abilities. It's also backed by extensive research by education experts. These things can be embedded easily today into Microsoft Teams, Word, OneNote, and Outlook. And finally, I wanted to call out Decision AI. Decision AI includes things like anomaly detector, which identifies problems early on, content safety and content moderator. This detects potentially offensive or unwanted content, and the personalizer creates experiences based on personal profiles and events. So all of these together allow you to incorporate better decision making in your business. Now I could go on to other AI services. There's just too many to call out here. But as you can see, there's an application for any objective you're trying to achieve here. Okay, well, at this time, we are going to go right into our demonstration of Azure OpenAI. Now, this is one of Azure AI services, one of many that we just saw. And this is going to be a good demonstration, a very basic demonstration of how to build an AI chatbot that you can actually implement into Microsoft Teams. Now, this has probably been done many times in the past. You may have even seen some demonstrations on it. But the thing is that if I can do it, you can do it too. So we're going to walk right through the process here. The first thing is that one of the prerequisites in order to do this is you're going to need to sign up to apply to access to Azure OpenAI. The web link is here in this QR code, so if you want to snap a photo of that, just so you have that link, it's really just a forms questionnaire just to make sure Microsoft knows who you are, Azure OpenAI knows who you are before they grant you that access. We're going to be creating a Microsoft Teams Q&A chatbot, and we're going to be leveraging the Azure OpenAI resource. we're also going to be leveraging Microsoft Power Virtual Agent to build our chatbot. So this is kind of a different platform that we're going to use, but it sits on top of Azure OpenAI's resource. Part of this process is to use Azure OpenAI Studio, which is a really cool tool to help you configure what the chatbot behavior will be. We're going to be leveraging Power Automate too. Power Automate is actually going to be embedded in the whole flow as we create and deploy this. And finally, what we're going to do is publish the chatbot as a Teams application so you can actually start using it. And hopefully you get some pretty scary answers back. All right, the first thing to do to get started in creating our automated chatbot is we need to create an Azure OpenAI resource. So go ahead and we'll click on the Azure OpenAI, and we're going to create the resource right here. Now, in case you can't get to this window, it simply means that you need to first request access to the Azure OpenAI service. And again, I posted that QR code to get you to that form so you can start filling it out and requesting that access. Now, what you'll see is I'm selecting my resource group, which I've already created, and I'll give it a fancy name here. We'll call it Azure AI Teams Bot, because this is going to appear in Teams. The pricing tier is the standard S0. You might see something different based on your subscriptions. And just go ahead and click on through the defaults through the next of it and create the resource. This is going to initialize the deployment. Might take a little bit of time for the deployment to proceed, but once it's done, you should see that the deployment has completed. Let's refresh it a bit. And now it shows that the deployment is complete and we can go to the resource. All right, now the next step is to ensure that your team and team channel is set up. So I've created a question and answers team here. You know what? I'm just going to put it under the general tab. But now I'm going into the Power Virtual Agent, and you can get to this just from your Teams, or you can add the application to that taskbar to the left. Let's go ahead and start creating, and we're going to create a chatbot, and you can see my teams that I've specified there, questions and answers. All right, we'll let that thing get ready, and you can see that it created the bot, and now I need to do a few more things here. I need to give it a name, so let me think of another creative name. I'll call this my Q&A assistant. And English is the language I choose, and the bot icon, we can get fancy here if you want. You could actually create your own. I'm just going to go ahead and choose an icon that is there. And this will take a moment as well as it's creating the Power Virtual Agent test bot, and we'll wait till this is complete. One thing that the Azure AI service gives you is it gives you access to the Azure AI Studio, and you can get to that easily by going to oai.azure.com with your credentials. Now, on first launch, you might see that it's going to prompt you for your subscription and the resource to use, and I'm going to choose my AI TeamSpot resource, and that was the one we created in the first step. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of things you can do in the studio. Now, instead of going straight to chat, because you would think that is where we want to go, we're actually going to go to deployments because we're going to create our deployment of the chatbot. So I'm going to select the model GPT 3.5 Turbo. Model version will be auto update. And let's give it a deployment name. We can name this really whatever we want. I'll give it a creative name here called Q&A Chat Deploy because I am deploying my Q&A chat. Let's go ahead and create that. And in a moment, you'll see that the deployment has been successful. All right, now we can actually go to the playground and click on chat to get into the chat playground. And this is really cool. Here's something I want to show you. You can actually specify how the chat should act. You can use a template. And there's a few examples here of the template. As you pull it down, you can see, let me pull that down for a second. You can make it act like an IRS tax consultant or hiking recommendations or a marketing consultant. I'm going to just choose the default right now. And at this point, we can test our chat right here, making sure that it works. I'm going to ask it a question. What is the spookiest place on earth? And as you can see that it's responding. So my GPT-3.5 is working as expected. So that is good news. So now we're going to move back to the Power Virtual Agent, and in particular, the Chatbots tab, as well as the Trigger Phrases area. Now, I've already created a trigger phrase here, and as you can see, the trigger phrase will be, I'd like to ask a spooky question. And the chatbot is going to respond with, how can I help you? And from here, we can start building the flow as follows. Let's go ahead and we're going to add an action here, call to action, and this is where we create a flow. And we use the Power Virtual Agent flows. From here, we're going to start off by doing a user input. So whatever the user inputs is the question, this is what's going to help define that user input. Pretty straightforward there. We're going to add an action, and the next step is to add an HTTP post. So the method is going to be post, because it's going to post the question, and it's going to post the question to the following URL. Now we have to find the URL back in the Azure AI Studio where we created our test chatbot. And there's a number of ways of grabbing the URL. Curl is one code that is fairly easy to find the URL in. So that's what I just did there. And I pasted in the openai.azure.com URL destination. There is an API key for security, and we copy that key in so that whatever user inputs happen and the post happens, it has to make sure it's coming from our environment. Now in the body of the post, you don't need to know how to code, but it's good to know if you know how to copy and paste it. And what we're doing here is we're copying and pasting in the JSON output of that chat. And basically speaking, this was done from a template, from a test that we did. So we do have to clean up some sections of this in order for it to be effective. So that's what we're doing here. Now the content that's going to be posted as well in the body is going to be what? The user input. All right, let's add another action here. And this action is going to be parsing the JSON code. So let's go through this just a little bit. Again, you don't need to know code per se, but it helps if you can know the tools that are used in order to get what the post requirements are. So in this case, we're going to post in the content. So in this case, the content will be the body of that post message and the schema. And the schema can be generated from a template based on our test chatbot code that it generated. And then we're going to add the action again of, this time it's going to be known as initialize variable. So let's choose initialize variable. And we're going to give this a name. It could be really any name here. This will be response value. The type is going to be a string. And the value is going to be, by the way, I'm going to just rename this so that it's the first answer that comes back, just so we can name it. You can name these whatever you want. So the value that we're looking for is going to be the first response value. And in order to get that, I've posted some information in our webinar content so that you have an idea of how to apply this. And then finally, the last action here in our flow is that we're going to return the value back to the Power Virtual Agent. So in other words, whatever value comes back from the GPT response is going to be posted back to the virtual agent, which in turn is going to be posted back into Teams. So what I did here was I saved the flow, and now we're going to continue on in the trigger phrases. And the call to action next here is I'm going to use that Power Virtual Agent flow template that we just created with all the JSON and the curl code and everything that you really don't need to know, but it's kind of good to be familiarized a little bit with it. And we're going to use the user input as the action there. So what's happening is it's basically going to post back the answer into Teams through the Power Virtual Agent. And then I'm going to have the chatbot say, hey, here's the spooky answer I found. So you can personalize it, kind of neat. And then we can paste in that answer that came back from the GPT response. From there, we can end it with a survey. This is kind of a neat thing where if you want to have the user kind of rate the response, we can do so by ending the conversation with a survey. Now that we've saved it and I think it's looking good, we can actually test it. So let's validate to see if this works. So if you remember, we have to start the question with the trigger phrase. So the user has to put in, I'd like to ask a spooky question. If it's anything other than that, the chatbot might not work. So let's go ahead and put in that trigger phrase there. And you can see that it's actually working. It says, how can I help you? And you can put a question in here. I'm typing in, what is the scariest story from the 1990s? And let's see if it comes back with the response. And it sure did. It came back with a response. And it asks me, did that answer your question? And it has a rating. And you know what? I'll pat myself on the back. I'll give myself a 5. So there we go. And that is the chatbot that's been tested, it's been validated, and now we can apply this in other areas. So let's proceed with that part. Okay, well, now that we've validated our Power Virtual Agent and tested out the chatbot and made our flow and did all those steps, the last thing we need to do is just publish it. Now, what does publishing do? Publishing does a few things. It makes it available as an application within your Teams environment. So we'll go ahead and publish it, wait till it's done here. And now as you can see, it's been published as my Q&A assistant. So we can open the bot in Teams, which we'll do right here. And we have the ability to add permissions or simply just add it. And when it's added, it is right there in Teams as an application. It's a chatbot application. Another thing you can do is you can make it available through searching for apps, and you'll see that that application that you created is right there. Yeah, so hopefully this demo was a good overview of how to use Azure AI, especially Azure OpenAI, how it can call out to GPT engines, how you can create an application using Power Virtual Agent, and how to use the AI Studio. So maybe this is something that you would implement in your environment. Again, making sure you're using the proper responsibility models with Azure AI. That's very important to do, but you can see there's a lot of neat capabilities here. Well, hopefully you found this webinar informative, and I can't leave without mentioning about Managed Solution and our story. And as you met some of my colleagues on the Azure AI Trick or Treat section of the webinar, you can tell who we are. We're technology-obsessed humans transforming the employee experience. And why we do it? We're determined. We think we can make people's lives much better through technology and connected experiences. In fact, we know we can. And where are we going with all of this? We're creating positive social impacts where limitless collaboration and unending connections are possible. So if you need to reach out to Managed Solution to check out our award-winning help desk services, or if you need some professional services help in the Microsoft areas, let us know. Thank you all for watching. I hope you have a great Halloween, and we're going to open it for some questions and answers at this point.